All right, everyone, welcome to the Week 3 Tonto's Demise recap. This week was absolutely bonkers, crazy. There were touchdowns all over the place. Even if you lost, you got to be feeling pretty good about your team, unless you are the Dub C hooligans this week. Um, it was crazy. Let me see here. We had Joseph Randall, Devontae Freeman, LeGarrette Blount, Jamal Charles, and Randall Cobb all scoring 3 touchdowns each. We had Julio Jones, A.J. Green, Steve Smith, Rashard Matthews, Greg Olsen, Keenan Allen, Adrian Peterson, and even Chris Johnson, CJ2K, got in. They all scored 2 touchdowns this week. It was the week of either your receivers, or it was touchdowns, or it was defense. For Detling, it was both. And I think the Arizona Cardinals defense, if you figured them out, they absolutely crushed the San Francisco 49ers and Colin Kaepernick. I think Kaepernick's first 2 passes were pick sixes, and their yardage total was ridiculously low. The Arizona Cardinals defense was, I think, 61 points this week. Just crazy. Seattle Seahawks got 50. I think Philadelphia was up near 40. Like there was points scored all over the place this week. I don't know if how many people were actually interested in this, but I figured it out. Overall, this week we had 2,164.6 points scored. In week 1, we had 1,951.55, which was an average of 162.6 per team. Last week, week 2, we were down a little bit. Total points was 1,839.35, which was a 153.3 average. This week, we jumped up to 2,164.6 points, an average score of 180. That was the average score this week. So, again, Dub C hooligans probably not feeling too good about those numbers, those statistics. I don't know that we've ever had 5 teams go over 200 points in 1 week, and we did this week. It was just ridiculous. There's no other way to describe it, so let's just get into it and run through it and get this done with. First of all, of course, we had FC Bohoric, the defending champion, going up against the fellow winless Detonators, and FC Bohoric took this one down. Final score was 215.95 to 177.95. FC had no Breeze this week, so he picked up Tyrod Taylor, 48 points from him. Demaryius Thomas, about as good as you could hope from him, 9 for 90 and a touchdown. Keenan Allen, he must be an every other week player, because this week he blew up in week 1, did nothing week 2. This week he had 12 catches, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Not much from Vincent Jackson, said LeGarrette Blount. He had 3 touchdowns. C.J. Anderson, not much from him. I mentioned Greg Olsen, 8 catches, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns from him. But not much from Spiller, not much from your kicker. Buffalo defense did pretty good against Miami. And as for the Detonators, plugged in Russell Wilson again this week, hoping for a big game. But a decent score. But Chicago definitely didn't make this one very competitive. 38 points from him. Your receivers, Sanders, Evans, and Hilton, each one scored about 15 points. You plug in Thursday night, you plugged in the 2 Washington Redskins running backs. Thought maybe that would be a good play. Turned out not so good. I think between those 2, they got you a total of less than 4. Delaney Walker, Pretty good game for him. You would have liked to see a touchdown or two. But your money man, Jamal Charles, not too many rushing yards or receiving stats. He did have 5 catches, but he also did get 3 touchdowns as Kansas City was playing. They were way behind, playing catch up most of the second half of that game on Monday night. Hauschka got you a bunch of field goals. He picked plug and play the Steelers defense. Ended up being a pretty good move. Not many turnovers or sacks, but yardage they kept pretty low. Kept the point total low and got the win here. So said 177.95, actually a pretty decent score for a normal week, but this week it wasn't enough as FC moves to 1-2, and Detonators fall down to 0-3. Let's see. Next in line here, we had the Springfield Isotopes going up against the Twerkin Bowl Cuts, and the Isotopes took this one down 224.1 to 158.45. Going into Monday night, Twerkin Bowl Cuts only had Aaron Rodgers left. I think the score was about 222 to 93. Aaron Rodgers went crazy. He had 5 touchdowns, over 300 yards. Just under half of your point total came from him. And you got 34 from Larry Fitzgerald. Another big game from him. I did forget to mention him before. He had 2 touchdowns also. 130 yards, 9 catches. 2 big weeks from him in a row. He's off to a great start this season. But it was the rest of your guys that really let you down, other than Frank Gore. I forgot to mention Frank Gore too. He had 2 touchdowns. But Pierre Garçon, Travis Benjamin, about 12 points from them. Jonathan Stewart, TJ Yeldon, about 5 from each of them. Tyler Eifert actually got 0. And your kicker, only a couple PATs from him. Cleveland defense, actually, Yahoo says 6, but unfortunately it was 0. Which is not good because on the other side of this one you had the Seattle Seahawks defense. Yahoo said 23, but it was actually 50 for the Springfield Isotopes. Peyton Manning, 55 points from him. Julio Jones, 12 catches, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. Antonio Brown, his streak remains alive. 11 catches, 100 yards. We'll see if that happens this week. I'm really going to be upset if Antonio Brown's ridiculous 5-catch, 50-yard streak ends this week just because Michael Vick sucks. That's going to be really... I hope it doesn't happen. It's going to happen eventually, but I'm going to be really disappointed if Michael Vick immediately comes in and blows the streak. So, Golden Tate, 10 points from him. Andre Williams, about 9 points from him. Started Niall Davis, because I wasn't paying attention Sunday morning to DeMarco Murray being out. Didn't plug in Ryan Matthews there. Unfortunately got 0 from Niall Davis. Thought he would actually get some carries or a possible touchdown, but that didn't work out. Jordan Reed, 16 points from him. Landry, his usual, 15 to 20 points. Not much from a kicker, but again, Seattle defense, 50 points from them. So nearly about 150 points just from Peyton Manning, Julio Jones, and the Seahawks defense, which was practically enough to take down Twerkin Bowl Cuts this week. And he moves, with this defeat, he is also 0-3, while the Isotopes move up to 3-0. Alright, next we had the Mighty Midgets going up against the Raritan Wolves, now deemed the Raritan Pups, after their 3rd defeat to the hands of Mighty Midgets. Final score was 204.65 to 143.7. For Mighty Midgets, not a whole lot of big players here, but a couple, just some pretty good numbers up and down. 50 points from Matt Ryan, 25 from Brandon Marshall. Looks like he's going to be a good one this year. Allen Robinson, last week he blew up, but came back to earth this week, only 10 points from him. Mentioned Rashard Matthews earlier. You picked him up off of waivers and plugged him in this week. He had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Latavius Murray, about 140 yards and a touchdown here for you. Let's see, David Johnson, hoping for maybe big things from him this year as the weeks go on, but not too much, only 25 yards here. Witten, playing on 2 bad ankles and a bad knee, 6 for 65. You flexed Shane Vereen, hoping to get some receiving stats here, but that didn't work out. Only 2.3 points from him. But all these Giants on your team ended up working out pretty good because Josh Brown, your kicker, had a bunch of field goals and a bunch of PATs, and your defense was also the Giants against the Redskins on Thursday night. They got a safety, a couple turnovers, yardage was pretty good. And that got you over the 200-point mark this week, just like most everyone else. As for the Raritan Pups, Andrew Luck is it the, I don't know. Whenever he was coming out of college, it was the suck for luck. Now it's the luck for suck. I don't know or something like that. That sounds disgusting, but he's just really disappointing this year. Statistically, you're hoping for 50, 60 points from him a week. Here he's just delivering 35 this week, and most of it came second half garbage time, piling up receiving stats here. I mean, not just watching the stats in that Tennessee game. You're hoping for big things, and then they won the game, but they were not doing well until probably midway through the third quarter into the fourth quarter. They made a frantic comeback here. Your receiving core, leaves a lot to be desired this year. You got Colston, you got Nate Washington, you got Doug Baldwin. You're really hoping for big things from those guys, and it's unlikely to get delivery from them. You got each one about 7 points from the 3 combined, on each one there, so about 24 points from them. Marshawn Lynch was primed, looked like he was primed to just blow up this week and have a huge game. He didn't come out of the locker room right away. Looked like talking about his calf injury. They said he was fine. They were working on his back, and then he went out, I think, something with his hamstring now, so I don't know. He did not get you much at all. He had just over 10 rushing yards. Jeremy Hill, again, 20 rushing yards from him. Jimmy Graham, finally some good things looking for him. 7 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. Moncrief, another touchdown for him. You had him in the flex, 14 points there. A couple PATs and a field goal from your kicker. And like I said earlier, the Eagles' defense, a couple turnovers boosted by Sproles' punt return touchdown. That was 9 points there because it was a long one. They got you about 40 points. But it was definitely your receiving core and your running backs. All of them just really underperformed this week and let you down. And it's tough anytime you go up against a 200-point performer. You're probably not going to get a win. And with that, the Raritan Pups, they now drop to 0-3, joining Brian and the Twerkin Bullcuts, while Mighty Midgets are now 2-1, and they are in 5th place. Next, we had the aforementioned Dubsy Hooligans going up against Possum Magic, and this one was nearly a 100-point defeat. It was about 94. Possum Magic with 205.85, while Dubsy Hooligans 111.15. You plugged in Nick Foles. It just won't stick with Matthew Stafford, even though I think he's actually had the highest score of any quarterback you've played every week this week. You plugged in Alex Smith last week. You plugged in Nick Foles this week. You would have been better off either time just sticking with Matthew Stafford. Not saying that's going to keep happening every week, but he's the guy you drafted to be your starting quarterback, and you lost faith almost immediately. But that's going to be what happens when you take Gronk, when you don't know your first 2 rounds. I think you took Gronk and Cooks, and if you don't grab one of those top guys, you're going to be in a tough situation, most likely, for most of the season. At the time, we thought you drafted a pretty good receiving core. Looked like they were going to be PPR monsters going into the season. Devontae Adams plugging in for Jordy Nelson. Saw good things from him last year. John Brown looks like he was ready to explode coming off of his rookie season. Just looked like he was primed for big things with that Arizona passing game and Carson Palmer coming back. And like I said, Brandon Cooks looked ridiculously good in the preseason. Bill Belichick said, thank God we don't have to play him twice a year. He actually ended up benching Cooks this week for Crabtree. And Devontae Adams suffering through an injury. He ended up not playing most of the game, I think, very early on. He twisted his ankle, which I think he was already working through a problem with that. Sat out pretty much the rest of the game. Got you 0. John Brown, 9 points. Crabtree, 7 points. Just can't get that production from the receiving core that you were hoping for. As for your running backs, thought that it seemed like they were pretty strong going into the season too. But this week, it's not getting those receiving stats. People really underestimate just how significant that is, I think, when it comes to the 2 running back spots. I think I've said it before. As far as I'm concerned, those 2 spots, people criticize me, you're just drafting the running back. You're doing the all wide receiver, no running back draft strategy. Well, if you look at my drafts from the past couple of years, you'll clearly see, and you can add, I've told people before, I probably shouldn't, but as far as I'm concerned, those 2 running back positions, you can throw anybody in those spots. Look, Justin Forsett this week got you 13 rushing yards. He was like a second round pick going into the draft this year, if he hadn't been a keeper. Guys like Marshawn Lynch look at Jimmy. Marshawn Lynch was his first pick, 5th or 6th overall. 10 yards from him this week. Jeremy Hill, only 20 yards from him this week. They're not gonna do 20 yards every week, but they're gonna be hit or miss from week to week. I think just that inconsistency, the way the league has changed. Outside of your flex, those 2 running backs, that's my opinion. You may disagree. It seemed like especially the draft this year, everybody was freaking out about their wide receivers taken early. You gotta load up on those guys because as you can see, the receivers are really where a lot of the points are coming from. Outside of your flex, you can flex a running back, you get one of those good ones, but it really just doesn't. Like I said, it's tough. It's a tough, especially this time of year, and I'm starting to just rant about my personal fantasy philosophy here, but this time of year, the running backs, like I said, you're gonna get a lot of hit or miss games. But as the year goes on and the weather starts to get bad, that's when the running backs, and once we get to playoff time, that's when the running backs really become crucial, I think, because they start to rely on them. It's later in the season, guys are worn down, tough to pass, a little bit, it's tougher to pass in bad weather, things like that. It seems like the running backs, they definitely uptick as the season progresses and you get to the end. But this time of year, it's the running backs, or it's the receivers that really kind of blow up, as we've seen. But you got to get to the playoffs first before you can have the greatest running backs in the world, but if they don't do much for you the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season, you're already in the tank, and you're fighting your way just to try to be playing in December. And it's just an uphill battle. But that's just my personal philosophy. It's debatable for sure. But like I said, with Dubsy Hooligans, he drafted what seemed like a receiving core that was going to be PPR monsters, 3 guys this year, but just hasn't panned out. Maybe next year. I mean, those guys are all still pretty young. Might take another year or 2 for them to come around, but it's all there's no removing the element of luck here in fantasy football. So, like I said, Dubsy Hooligans drops to 1-2, 111.15. Sorry to say, you are knocked out of the knockout pool this week, joining the Wolves and FC Bohoric, while Possum Magic remains one of the undefeated teams, and he is 3-0. Third place for him. Next, we had Huber Squasher. Well, first let's go to we'll go to the other one first here, because we were just talking about the 100-point difference between Possum Magic and Dubsy Hooligans. Well, we had Chips My Boy trying to get his first win going up against Vanilla, and Chips My Boy ends up taking this one down. If you watched on Monday night, the Chips My Boy had 174.1 and was up by about 35, 36 points. Going into Monday night, all Vanilla had was Randall Cobb, and Randall Cobb proceeded to get you, I think, about 34.5 points out of the 35.5 that you needed. So, Vanilla, your final score was 173.3. A 0.8 difference. 8 yards anywhere here or there. Sorry to say. I feel bad for you, but it's just kind of funny. Your kicker got you -1. You actually have 2 kickers, and you benched the Chicago Bears kicker, Robbie Gould, who scored 0, and you played Prater, who missed. He had a PAT was blocked by the Denver defense, getting you -1 because he did not attempt any PATs or any field goals in this game. So, -1 cost you the game. If you had actually stuck with Gold and he had gotten you 0, you actually would have been better off in this one. And actually, you would have won if you had gotten a 0 from your kicker instead of -1. You also got 0 from Vernon Davis. That definitely didn't help. Said Randall Cobb, 34 points, 3 touchdowns from him. Tom Brady, another big game. 33 completions, over 350 yards, 62 points from him. Hopkins, 8 for 100 and a touchdown. But, I said not Calvin Johnson. I see C. Johnson, and I just think of Calvin Johnson because you kind of forget that Chris Johnson is still even in the league or relevant. But here he is, over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns from him this week. But the rest of your team, they just really, anything else could have happened for you. It would have changed the outcome of this one. Marquise Lee only got you 1 catch. Hyde only got you 50 yards. Said Vernon Davis, 0. Matt Forte, no catches in that game. 74 rushing yards. I was watching that game. All he did in the first quarter was hand it off to Forte, running the ball. Unbelievably, not 1 reception in that game for Matt Forte. That could have turned, so many little things that could have turned this one. Your Jets defense was at home against the Eagles, who looked terrible the week before, but they came out and looked good. Jets defense, Yahoo says 7, might have been just a little bit more than that. But again, just wasn't enough. Just barely not enough to take Chips My Boy, who Sam Bradford and Jordan Matthews, boy, they looked great in week 1. After that, they kind of fizzled out. 24 from Bradford, 11 from Matthews, 20 points from Amari Cooper. Looks like he's going to be pretty good. I don't know if drafting him in the second round this year was a good idea or not. You probably won't be able to keep him because he'd be a first round pick next year unless you really think unless you get a late first round pick and you think he might be worth it somewhere down the line. Mike Wallace, not much from him. Gordon, not much from him. 8 points from Wallace, 5 points for Gordon. Your first pick, top pick, Adrian Peterson, finally really turns it on this week. 120 yards, 2 touchdowns from him. Larry Donnell, only 6 points, but here was the big one. Devontae Freeman, going all sorts of crazy with, what's his name? From Coleman, Tevin Coleman from Atlanta. He was out this week. Devontae Freeman, 3 touchdowns, 140 yards rushing, bunch of catches, bunch of receiving yards, 45 points from him, probably a career high. Perhaps the best game of his life since he was in high school would be my guess, at least fantasy stat-wise. Kicker, only 1 PAT from him, and the Colts defense. You would have liked to see a little bit more from them here. They got you a long touchdown. That actually saved your day. It was just barely a long touchdown. If it had been less than, I think it was 69 yards. If it had been 4 yards less, you would not have gotten the 5 yards less. You would not have gotten the +3 bonus, and you would have lost this one. Couple sacks, couple turnovers, but they gave up a ton of yardage, ton of points, but they got you the win here. And Vanilla, not much you can do about this one. Your team did good. You just really got unlucky at the very end. Just those couple players that are said Forte, not one single catch from him. How often is that going to happen? Your tight end, Vernon Davis, 0 from him. Negative points from your kicker. Just a lot of little things that did not go your way this week, but you're still 2-1. Not too much to complain about. You're in 4th place. As for Chips, my boy, he gets his first win, avoids the 0-3 club. He is the 1-2, and he is in 8th place. And finally, we started talking about this one, Huber Squashers versus the Rook. Huber Squashers, just absolutely going crazy this week. Highest score of the week, highest score, I think, of the season so far. 232.5. Let me see. Yeah, just barely. Week 1, Vanilla had 231 points. This week, you got the top score of the season so far, 232.5. As for the Rook, he had 142.9. Not a bad score, but definitely not enough this week. Probably would have liked to still have Jeremy Maclin in your lineup, I think, over Terrence Williams, who got you 0. And you traded for DeMarco Murray, who almost immediately got hurt and did not play this week, got you 0. Obviously, he was riding the bench. But this one was just out of control pretty much from the get-go with all the 1 o'clock games. Ben Roethlisberger, though, as we all know, went down. Michael Vick came in, tacked on about 7 or 8 points to your quarterback total, putting it up to about 32, 33. Julian Edelman, typical game for him, 8 for 85. But no touchdowns, though. All the touchdowns came from Steve Smith. Second huge week in a row from him. 13 catches, 2 touchdowns, 186 yards. Just ridiculous. If you were watching any of that game, the Bengals-Ravens game, like I said, AJ Green had almost 50 points, over 200 yards from him, 2 touchdowns, including an 80-yard touchdown. So it was funny because I was looking at my team's recap from this week. They listed Julio Jones as having 43.8 points or something like that this week. and it said that was the third best wide receiver score this week. Really, 43 points was the third best score? Yeah, but it was just that kind of week this week. But Roddy White for you, 0 points. That didn't really matter too much because Joseph Randle, I think, had pretty much did all his damage in the first quarter of the Cowboys game. I think his rushing total actually went down. I seem to recall him he was over 90 in the first quarter with his 3 touchdowns. He had dropped down, ended up having 87 rushing yards. He got 10 yards and a touchdown from Hillman. Very little from Black Unicorn, Martellus Bennett. Le'Veon Bell, they came out and started throwing the ball to him right away. He had 7 catches for 60 yards, 7 for 70, I should say, plus 60 yards rushing. No touchdowns, though, but you'll take 26 points from him pretty much every week from here on out. Crosby, a couple of PATs and a field goal. And previously I mentioned the Arizona Cardinals defense, and they just went bonkers on Colin Kaepernick and the 49ers. 4 interceptions, 2 turnovers. The yardage point, only 7 points. The yardage stats were ridiculously low. Not many, just everything. Yahoo says 37, but like I said before, I think actually ended up being 61, which has to be about as high as you can possibly get without getting a shutout because so those yardage totals were just really low. I think the passing yards were under 75. I think you got 9 there for that. So just piled on those points with your defense and led you to the highest score of the week, highest score of the year so far. As for the Rook, I guess we should mention him a little bit. Phillip Rivers had a huge week 1, come back to earth a little bit here. Only 33 points from him. Beckham Jr., 7 for 79 and a touchdown. Pretty much a standard day, what you're hoping for from your best receivers. Calvin Johnson, 8 for 77. Would have liked to see a touchdown there from him, though, to make the numbers a little bit better. Like I said, 0 from Terrence Williams. Gurley got you less than 1. LaShawn McCoy caught a touchdown pass, which saved you because he had 15 rushing yards. Kelsey, 6 for 80 and a 2-point conversion, 16 points from him. And you would have liked to see maybe a touchdown or 2 in all that garbage time, the fourth quarter last night. But Dunbar, good flex play. Looks like he's going to be as long as Brandon Weeden is the quarterback. He only had 5 rushing yards, but he did have 10 catches for 100 yards. So good things from him you like to see. Maybe you would hope he could have punched in a touchdown or 2, but not this week. Your kicker, a field goal and 3 PATs, but I see he is now on IR, so you might have to make a move there. I don't know if you drafted 2 kickers or not, but you probably have to make a move there somewhere. New England defense, a couple sacks, a turnover, only 17 points, not too bad, but they did give up a pretty decent amount of yardage there to the up-and-coming Jacksonville Jaguars offense. They got some pretty decent pieces, but they're still putting it together. Going into New England, it's always going to be a tough matchup. Yahoo says 11. I think it was a little bit more than that, but for New England. But not a bad week, but not good enough in this week. This crazy scoring week, 143. Just not quite good enough this week, unless you had been playing the Wolves or actually no, you would have lost to the Wolves. You would have lost to the Wolves. The only team you would have beaten this week was the Dub Sea Hooligans. But you're still 2-1. That's only your first loss. You're in 6th place. It's only 3 weeks into the season, so not much to feel too bad about. If you got your first loss this week, if you got your first win this week, you got to be feeling pretty good. Spirits turned around maybe a little bit after a couple disappointing first couple weeks. As for the 0-3 teams, they can't be feeling too good, but you still got you got good players, you got good lineups, detonators, and you got a lot. You guys are scoring points, but you're just getting unlucky. I think this year you're one of some of the more higher scored against teams so far. But yeah, just a quick look at the standings here. If you're OCD, you love it because we got 12 teams. We got four groups of three. 3-3-0s, 3-2-1s, 3-1-2s, and 3-0-3s. So, ran through it as quick as I could here this week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Don't know when the recap will be for next week. I will be in Florida, visiting family, spending vacation. So who knows? Maybe I will find a way to arrange a recap with Mighty Midgets here. Maybe we'll find a way to incorporate both of us into a little. Maybe do a little Disney recap of the league here next week. But I don't know. We'll see how busy we are. Everybody's got plans, so I'll see what we can do. But just to give you guys a heads up, there might not be a recap next week, at least in video form. But I'll see what I can do. All right, like I said, this week Dubsy Hooligans out from the knockout pool, and so that's pretty much it for this week. And good luck to everybody here coming up in week 3, or week 4, I should say. Already 4 weeks into the season. A lot of good matchups. Glad to have the podcast back in session for the season. Hopefully they'll have some good things to say about the matchups. We got some pretty good matchups here coming up this week. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the undefeated teams going up against each other. That's always fun to watch. But we do have 2 0-3 teams going up against each other, so one of you is going to get a win. Got to feel good about that. Who's it going to be, though? I don't know. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. Week 3, week 4 coming up. So, good luck to everyone this week, and we'll see you, if not next week, 2 weeks from now. So, have fun and good luck, and hopefully your team avoids serious injury this week because they're dropping like flies. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.